Well, it goes on. 2 more trucks have been set alight at Empangeni in KwaZulu-Natal overnight. This comes after at least 10 trucks were torched in separate incidents over the weekend in 3 provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga and Limpopo. Now, these acts have been slammed by the Transport Department and it is working with the Ministry of Police to bring the perpetrators to book. SABC economics reporter Katlego Legodi is at the Southern African Transport Conference and joins us now live. Katlego, a good morning to you. An important conference really that looks at the sector and its contribution to the economy. But I imagine even at this conference, very difficult to ignore the torching of these trucks in some of those discussions.
Yeah, most definitely. A very good morning to you, Naledi, and to our viewers at home. Of course, businesses this morning counting the losses following another incident that we saw play out in KZN overnight. Those that are in the sector, they are here today on the second day of the Southern African Transport Conference. They're taking stock, Naledi, in terms of those well-needed interventions that will have to come from the private sector and from government to intervene. Just yesterday, seeing the Minister of Transport, Sindisiwe Kunga, just also calling on the police to leave no stone unturned in ensuring that those that are perpetrators in this regard are brought to book. Of course, you can imagine that business activity and economic activity have been hampered by what we've been seeing happening over the arteries, this main arteries, the main corridors, this being the N4, the N3, those that see really a large contingent of trucks every day moving from province to the next in trying by all means to ensure that there's business activity. Now, as we're talking right now, you're hearing that the economy is also suffering losses as these disruptions like what we saw happen on Sunday. They tend to see just the lack of movement, that stretch of the road closed for hours, and people are really also, those that are commuters are really also frustrated by what has been happening over here. But here we're seeing just issues coming under the spotlight, being the freight and logistics and how really we can get the best out of the public transport sector. But rail is something that has been a cause for concern, because you can imagine that the number of trucks that are on the road right now moving between these provinces is because there's no rail, an effective rail sector in the country that would ensure that it moves the burden from the streets into the rail system that would ensure that there's movement of good and the economic activity that is prudent over time. But I'm going to bring some of those that are in this sector into the conversation right now. Actually, we'll bring in Dr. Paul Nodegan, who comes through in this sector. You're part of the heavy transport vehicle just industry, and we know very well that we're seeing that today you're going to also be presenting in terms of freight and concerns, really, Doctor, coming out of this torching of trucks that we've seen happen in this past couple of days. Just react with us. What are you guys feeling around really what has been happening in this industry as we speak right now?
Good morning. Yes, and as you said, the freight transport on the roads is absolutely critical to the economy. The problem with rail, so we're having a big increase in trucks on the road over the last number of years, and a lot of the freight is so important for delivery for our consumers. And when you have delays like this, it not only affects the trucks, obviously, that are burnt, and the freight, the commodity that's being transported, the drivers. I mean, it's tragic for the drivers, the kind of fear that they go through. But then the delays of all the trucks on these major corridors, it has a huge impact on costs, and it eventually ends up being more costly to the consumer.
And also, Doctor, when we look at the investor confidence, what has been happening right now, I'm sure one would say that it's a concern looking at a brand South Africa in the eyes of those that are actually investors planning to come into South Africa right now. What does that do to investor confidence, what we're seeing happen over this past couple of days?
Absolutely. If it happens once, if there's a single incident and then it gets dealt with by the police, that's one thing. But when it continues, like we've had now 3 days in a row, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's absolutely important that the police get onto this, that they find out who the perpetrators are, and then that would help to assist with maintaining the business confidence. But as you say, I mean, if this carries on, it will have a big impact on business, especially overseas investments. If you remember, the first burnings actually occurred 2 years ago at Mooi River. So we've had a lot of incidents over the last couple of years, and we need to find ways of finding out who's responsible and getting those people to book so that we put a stop to this, because this is like an artery. These are arteries in the country for the movement of freight and other passengers, private people, and so to close them down just has a huge impact on the logistics and the freight movements in the country.
We saw the minister as well yesterday talking about this economic regulator bill that is before Parliament right now, and they're pushing for the president to pass that bill that would ensure that it opens ways for rail to flourish in the country right now. Let us in on how important is it that we go back to basics, we get the rail sector right, so that at least we mitigate and we kill the numbers of those trucks that are on the road daily, moving from one province to the next. So at least there are consolidated efforts here for economic activity.
Yes, no, that's very important. In fact, I started my career in the railways, so I'm very passionate about the role of rail in freight movements. But if you look around the world, even if we can get the rail moving, being more effective and providing a better service, there's still always going to be a huge percentage of freight on the road. So whatever we can do with rail, yes, that will help to mitigate some of these problems, but we have to tackle the issues of freight on the road. Overloading, speeding, fitness of vehicles, and of course these current torchings of trucks. That's not going to go away. You can get, I think, less than 15% of freight now is moving on the rail. It used to be 60%. So there's been a huge movement from rail to road. We can reverse that. Maybe go from 15 up to 20 or 25%. That'll be a big change, a massive change. But we're still going to have plenty of freight on the roads, and there's a lot of just-in-time freight that will never be appropriate for the rail. So the efficient movement of freight on our national roads particularly is absolutely critical. It needs to be addressed.
Dr. Paul Nuregen, thank you very much, sir, for your time. Is coming through as someone that is in the sector today is going to be presenting around freight and logistics, and we'll see some of those that are in the sector as well react with us in terms of what has been happening here. But one, I must just say, Naledi, that what has been happening, they really hasn't sat down well with those that are here. They're looking at interventions coming from Parliament, and they're talking about really getting the transport sector right. Remember that the theme here is about reimagining the transport sector here in South Africa so that it can be able to compete there at global standards. So some of these incidents that we are seeing happening in the country right now, they don't speak to what this conference is all about, and hence they'll be talking about mitigating, they'll be talking about just coming through with those solutions that are needed, including those that would see the trucks reduced on the road, and some of those people that are perpetrators in terms of the torching of these trucks are brought to book. Naledi?
Is a concerning matter, Katlego. Thank you so much for bringing us the latest though from that conference. That there, SABC economics reporter Katlego Legodi.